Hey, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Jody's All True Crime spoken version of the case from earlier today. It's going to be the case about Laurie Show and how her murder and stalking all kind of came about. So, this being a true crime video, please, nobody under the age of 14, and even then, your discretion is advised. Anybody with any triggers to child abuse, harm of children, stalking, anything like that, please just pick another video. So, as you can see, I am using my other mic, which is for speaking. This is my fourth time doing this video. I will get this mic correct. So let's begin with the spoken version of Laurie Show. Now, Laurie Show, her death was from a stalking, which eventually led to a murder. It was 1991, December. Laurie Show, 15, was stabbed with a knife in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. The person who did this is Michelle Lambert, who was 19 at the time. And why would somebody just out of the blue stab somebody or stalk them and then break into their house, stab them, and kill them? A 15-year-old little, kid? Well, she was jealous. It was all about jealousy. A naive and trusting Laurie Show became entangled in the lives of Michelle Lambert, and her boyfriend, Lawrence Yunkin. Lambert initially befriended Show, but after Yunkin allegedly raped Show, Lambert became jealous and enraged. Can you believe that? That she's jealous and enraged because her boyfriend raped this young girl. So Lambert began a campaign of harassment, stalking Show, often with assistance of her friends. So on December 20th, 1991, Laurie Show was murdered in her home by Lambert and Lambert's friend, Tabitha Buck. I'm just looking down at my notes. Even though I've done this so many times, I don't want to get any of the facts wrong because this is a long case. This is actually going to be part one. So, Show's mother found her. And Show's mother, Hazel, actually found her dying daughter in her house after Lambert had concocted some fake story that she needed to contact or go to the school for a counselor's appointment that she had. And she had no idea she had this, of course, because it was false. Well, as she returned home 30 minutes later, she sees, she doesn't know where her daughter is, and she finally finds her, and she's lying there in a puddle of blood. So she cradles her head. She sees her throat is slit, and she is stabbed multiple times in the back and beat profusely. And then her mother asks her, "Who did this to you?" And Laurie Show says, "Michelle. Michelle did this." Now, two experts at the trial were asked if this is possible, that the way her throat was slit, would she be able to, get this out at that point? And both experts said absolutely. So that it would be possible that she could mumble, and especially somebody so close to her, like her mother, would be able to understand her. And she would have no reason to blame Michelle Lambert if she didn't do it, because she just would want, I know as a mother, I'd want just the killer to come to justice. I'm not going to blame some innocent girl just because I don't like her. I mean, that adults don't do that. Normal. And the police quickly arrest Lambert, Yunkin, and Buck. So Yunkin pled guilty and testified against Lambert in exchange for a reduced sentence of 20 years. So he originally had gotten a year, but because of the pretrial sentencing, they decided that wasn't enough, that there wasn't, something went awry there. And he got 10 to 20, and he ended up doing 12. So he was out in 2003 with a year or two of probation, and that's it. I mean, he's been free ever since. They arrested them at the bowling alley, which is where he bowls. Well, where he did bowl up until it burned down. And that's where he was before he helped the girls killed Laurie, and after. That's where they arrested them. So after he gets out of prison, what does he do? He goes right to his old bowling hangout. It kind of shows me what kind of person this is. Somebody who has no remorse or regard. I don't think I could ever go back to a place that I had been arrested at for, when the murder, the innocent life had been taken, that I was involved in. But I guess everybody's different. So Lambert and Buck were convicted and sentenced to life without parole. But Lambert wasn't going to sit back and let this just be the end of that. No. You will kind of see the progression of the kind of person that Lambert really is. I believe she is a very narcissistic personality. That's just my personal opinion. That she likes the attention. That it doesn't matter wherever she goes, she has an issue. She has a problem. Somebody rapes her. She blames the cops on the case, saying that these 8 police officers gang raped her. The prosecution, they falsified all of the evidence. So to point to her, they actually took Laurie's blood and wrote something on the wall indicating that she was guilty, that they had messed with videotapes from of course, because that's what all prosecutors do when they're trying to win a case. I don't think so. That does not sound very feasible to me, but who knows. But they were cleared. The 8 officers and the prosecution were eventually cleared of all that. And you'll hear that in a little bit. But here's Lisa Michelle Lambert's stint, like the first year in jail. She is currently incarcerated at Massachusetts Correctional Institute at Farmington, Massachusetts, serving life without parole for first-degree murder of 15-year-old Laurie Show. Lambert was convicted on July 20th, 1992 for the December 19th, 1991 stalking and brutal stabbing murder of Laurie Show. Investigators for the defense stated that it had been brought to their attention by those they'd interviewed that Lisa Lambert was a serious liar and very good at it. Between her various changing stories about the killing, claims against her co-conspirators, killers, and her claims against local police officers who were investigating the murder, Lambert has certainly lived up to all of those claims. Sorry, I'm just trying to sit fairly comfortably. She has been previously incarcerated in Cambridge Springs Correctional Facility, Pennsylvania, but then transferred to Clinton, New Jersey, then to a women's correctional facility at Baylor, Delaware, and then later transferred to... Okay, so she is moving around quite frequently from one place to another, and which either tells me that she is being harassed or just she is a problem inmate. And because they will do that, they will actually move people from place to place when they become an issue. Tabitha Buck was a co-conspirator with Lambert. She was convicted of secondary murder and is serving life in prison. However, I did read recently that she was released on parole. So that is the last that I did read of her after 28 years behind bars. She didn't make exactly the same amount of ruckus that Lambert did in her 30-some years that she's been in prison. In 1992, Lambert filed post-verdict motions claiming that her conviction was, quote, against the weight of the evidence, unquote. 1994, the physical findings at the crime scene, the testimony at the trial of the defendant, the trial testimony of Hazel Show, the history of ill will between defendant and victim, and the circumstantial evidence developed at trial all led to the conclusion that defendant was guilty of the murder of Laurie Show. 1996. Lambert filed a lawsuit claiming that prison guard James Eicher had attacked her 6 times during 1994 and that another official had fondled her. Further that she was videotaped during a strip search. Eicher was convicted of aggravated indecent assault and sentenced to 2 years in prison. 1997. Lambert was freed briefly for 10 months. When a federal district judge ruled that Lambert was, quote, actually innocent, unquote. One of the only 2 people that I've read about or even spoke of that have thought she had been innocent in any way, shape, or form. A federal appeals court overturned the ruling and Lambert was returned to prison 10 months later. The court found that Lambert had brought her case to the federal courts prematurely without exhausting her opportunities for appeal in Pennsylvania. 1997, Lisa Lambert's appeal denied. 1998, conviction upheld. Lambert's claim that she was framed by prosecutors rejected. So 1998, request for release during appeal denied. 2003, 8 law enforcement officers cleared of misconduct in Lambert's case. 2005, appeal to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court refused to hear her case. Incarcerated in Clinton, New Jersey, Lambert has now exhausted all of her appeals. She will continue to serve out her life sentence in prison. She has gotten her criminology degree from Boston University. She has, I think, even gotten a master's, which is kind of aggravating because it's on our taxpayers' dollar. And here she's doing all of this while, really Laurie Show should have been doing all of that. Laurie wanted to be a lot of things, and she didn't get the chance. So, continue on with the timeline. 2007, a Lancaster County judge has determined that a civil lawsuit filed by State Correctional Institute, Cambridge, Springs inmate Michelle Lambert against administrators at the facility for allegedly failing to prevent her from being sexually abused by employees was scheduled to be heard by a jury. On this woman, 2007, the state of Pennsylvania has decided to settle a lawsuit brought by convicted killer Lisa Lambert, who claimed she was sexually assaulted by guards at the Cambridge Springs State Correctional Institute. The civil lawsuit had been placed on hold until Lambert had exhausted all of her appeals in her criminal case. The money, $35,000, went to pay court cost restitution, and if any was left, then it went to her parents, who were raising her daughter, which she had 10 months later after the brutal murder of Laurie Show. And it was Lawrence Yunkin's daughter as well. But actually, Lambert's parents have full custody of this child, even though they divorced later on. So the teen was murdered 30 years ago in December, so it wasn't that long ago. Or it wasn't, the anniversary wasn't all that long ago. December 19th, 2011, Lisa Michelle Lambert is 39. That was in 2011, so she'd be 49 today. Lambert is now 49 years old and lives inside a Massachusetts prison. The convicted killer earned a college degree behind bars, where she has spent almost all of her adult life, except for a 10-month period of freedom. Tabitha Buck is 47 and housed at a state prison for women in Muncie in northeastern Pennsylvania, and she has been released on parole. She tutors inmates. She tutored when she was in prison. She tutored inmates, and really, I guess she was a pretty good inmate. Lawrence Yunkin is now 50, freed from prison in the area. He was a good bowler, had Facebook page, but Laurie show will forever be 15. She will always be beautiful and have dark hair, and looking forward to getting her license. But unfortunately, she didn't get that opportunity because it was taken from her. She hoped to be a nurse or a hairdresser one day, have kids, have grandkids, like the rest of us. But she doesn't get that chance. So 30 years ago, Yunkin drove Lambert and Buck to Laurie's mom's East Lampeter Township condominium. The two young women burst inside and attacked Laurie. So what actually happened was Lambert knew she had to have somebody else go up to the front door because nobody else would let her in. I mean, the neighbors knew who she was. She knew that Laurie wouldn't let her in. Laurie's mom was, they had slyly gotten her out of there, which was too bad. And the two young women because Tabitha Buck was actually just newly friended Lambert, Laurie didn't really know her all that well. So she opened the door for her, and that's when Lambert and Buck burst inside. It catapulted onto the, Lambert slit the young woman's throat and killed her in a fit of jealous rage, stabbing her 4 times in the back and puncturing one of her lungs. And in one interview, Lambert says, "Yeah, I punctured one of her lungs because I could hear the wheezing like I had hit a lung, and air was coming out." Buck sat on Laurie's legs to keep her from fighting. The case is perhaps the country's best-known murder case. It catapulted onto the stage in the late 1990s when Lambert appealed her life sentence. She alleged prosecutor tampered with evidence to frame her for the murder so they could silence her about an alleged gang rape by police, a charge later rejected by the court. A federal judge agreed, briefly freeing Lambert from prison in a movement that stunned many in the United States. She then had a series of well-publicized appeals, one which reversed the federal judges that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The highest court refused to hear Lambert's case in 2005. In recent years, the national spotlight has turned to Amanda Knox, Casey Anthony, and others involved in lurid crimes. Time in life has moved on, so they're not paying attention to her as much. However, she's been able to. There has been a book on this. She has written a book on this, on her innocence. There's been a movie a TV series, a TV show, Lifetime, ID. I mean, you go on and on and on. And basically, Lambert got what she wanted, all the attention in the world. The district attorney at the time became a county judge. The county judge who heard her case and declared her guilty twice became a federal judge who works in the same courthouse as a federal judge who freed Lambert after declaring her, quote, actually innocent, unquote. The two see each other regularly, but never speak of the case. The Philadelphia attorney who handled Lambert's defense appeal moved to Vermont, where she now works on the other side of the Loring aisle, prosecuting sex crimes. So, life marched on for Show's parents as well, John Show and Hazel Whitehead, who lost their only daughter in December of 1991. But much remains painfully unchanged. Divorced from John Show at the time of the murder, Whitehead, now 70, remarried 20 years ago, but separated and is now divorced. She worked at the local outlet store, and she stays in the condominium, or had stayed. I don't know about currently at this very moment, but when this article was written, that I'm getting this from True Crime, she says that even though that horrible crime happened here, she said the best memories of her life with Laurie are there. So she doesn't want to leave. She says she feels her daughter's presence there, she said. When her television set and vacuum cleaner switch on by themselves, or a light flickers, quote, it makes you more comfortable to think she's nearby, unquote, she said. Quote, I know technically she's in heaven, but sometimes I think she's saying, hey, Mom, I'm still here. I'm watching out for you, unquote. Show 70 retired from his job working. He retired at 60, though. Show at 60 retired from his job working for a farm machinery manufacturer a few years ago, but then got called back to work. He enjoys his godchildren, but thinks about the grandchildren he never will have. He speaks to others who have lost loved ones and hosts an annual candle lighting service for them. To most people, he will always be simply Laurie Show's father. So that horrific day. Hazel Whitehead left her home 30 years ago for what she thought was an appointment with her daughter's guidance counselor at school. She did not know the call was a ruse to get her out of the house. In 1991, had brought a difficult fall for Whitehead and her daughter. Yunkin had briefly dated Laurie during a time he had broken up with Lambert. Later, Lambert and Yunkin would get back together, and Laurie allegedly was furious that Yunkin had dated the younger girl. Lambert called Laurie's home, harassed her, and made plans to cut off her hair, Whitehead and other witnesses said. So, other witnesses and her mother, had proof of all of this. Tabitha Buck knocked on the door and forced their way in. Now, who was the driver? That's where Yunkin comes in. He actually drove the girls there and back and helped get rid of the evidence. Actually, he claimed that Laurie took a shower at his house. Tabitha Buck said Lambert sliced Laurie's throat. Lambert said Buck and Yunkin did the killing. So, two are blaming her, and she's blaming, both of them. In 1992, trial followed. Lambert chose to have her case heard solely by a judge. In Lancaster County Judge, Lawrence Stengel got the case. Quote, I remember the high level of emotion, unquote, said Stengel. Now a U.S. District Court judge who has offices in Philadelphia and Reading. Quote, it was a horrific story that was difficult to believe, unquote. And he found her guilty and sentenced both of the girls to life in prison. And Yunkin had pleaded guilty. And his sentence was, reduced to 10 to 20 years for his part in the murder, driving the two young women back and forth and helping to get rid of evidence. But he served only 12 years. So we know that Michelle Lambert had gotten out of jail for that small 10-month period. She ended up back in Stengel's courtroom again as he presided over a hearing in her case that drew national attention with this wide-ranging and often bizarre accusation of prosecutorial misconduct. Lambert's Philadelphia attorneys, Christina Rainville and Peter Greenberg, accused prosecutors of moving Show's body to shoot bogus crime scene photos, switching pieces of evidence, tampering with crime scene videotapes, and committing dozens of deceitful acts. They didn't have to do this. This was absolutely such a bizarre thing to even accuse the prosecutors of, because they had their killers. The police cut the deal, and the prosecutor cut the deal with Yunkin. But they weren't going to cut the same deal with Laurie, Lambert, or Buck, because they believed they were the actual killers. And obviously, evidence, crime scene tapes or videotapes. I mean, there was enough evidence in this case that court after court after court after court, claimed that Lambert killed Laurie Show in an act of jealousy. So the fact that she had one judge, probably who had a dozen other cases sitting in front of his desk, just, believe her, actually ended up being to her disadvantage. If she would have probably followed the law and have gone through the court as she should have, she may have actually had a chance to have her case reheard appropriately, and maybe she would have been found not as guilty. I don't know. Maybe that was Laurie Show's way of stepping in, via another place and preventing that from happening. You never know. Christy Fawcett was the prosecutor in the case before Stengel. Then with the state attorney general's office, she's now a U.S. attorney in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The Lambert case consumed 3 years of her life, she said. The elements of it, the teenage love triangle, the lurid allegations of prosecutorial misconduct, made it a riveting case. Fawcett said the case came along just as court cases began to capture the entire country's attention on television. The national media descended on Lancaster for the hearing before Stengel. ABC later featured it on 2020. The Los Angeles Times wrote about it. The New York Times editorialized on it. There was a book and a television series, a movie, written on this case. The case did one thing. Laurie's death was not in vain. And actually, she is a hero in my book. She has saved countless lives by her and her mother's perseverance in getting this state to spawn an anti-stalking law in Pennsylvania. And here's why this was so important to Laurie's mom. They actually tried to go to the police and explain what was going on to the police, and there was really nothing they could do. She had come up to Laurie's mom and a friend, I think, or maybe her father at the time, or her stepfather. Now, she started screaming at her in public. And, I mean, anybody who's going to do that, threatening to cut off her hair and, stay away from Yunkin and all this stuff. Then another account says that where Show had actually been beaten up by Lambert in an alley. She was pounding her head against a red truck, said a witness. So, listen, the only person that really had a motive was Lambert. Why would Tabitha? She could have probably cared less. She was just helping her friend get into the door. Had no idea that was what was going to end up happening. And I'm sure, who knows what Yunkin thought. He doesn't really and hasn't really seemed to show any kind of remorse. He owes Laurie's mom $12,000 in restitution and has only paid, at that point, that was 10 years ago, had only paid, he owed her $7,000 more. And it was just, he goes back to the same bowling alley he's arrested in. I'm just showing no kind of remorse at all. So what are the defenders of this case doing now? So Rainville and Greenberg have retired to Vermont in 2005, the same year that the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear Lambert's case. She volunteered for a while at her children's elementary school. So the defense, that's what she is doing now. She got bored, actually, and went back to work after working at a public defender's office. Greenberg, though, remains retired, she said. Rainville is the chief deputy state attorney in Bennington County, a role similar to that of an assistant district attorney in Pennsylvania. She feels comfortable as a prosecutor in Vermont, where she said the procedural rules are different from Pennsylvania's. She specializes in the prostitution and prosecution of child sex offenders. Work she finds very satisfying. Quote, working with children and giving them a voice. It is very rewarding work, and I totally love it, unquote, she says. Anyway, I'm just going to briefly go over this because I don't want to... Rainville really still believes that Lambert is innocent. I guess she's worked her charm on her. And that's about the only person except for the other judge. So I just wanted to briefly mention that. So, as Lambert, actually, even though she bounces around in prison, and her life in prison wasn't all that easy, she still gets $35,000, is in constant battle, gets her degree from Boston University, or the University of Boston. Boston University, graduates with honors. She has a child, becomes a mother. Basically her life, other than being behind bars, she gets everything paid for. I think she even got her master's, as I said prior. Lambert's daughter is now almost 30 years old. And I wonder what she thinks about all this. I wonder if she even knows. I'm sure she does. It does not know where she lives. Rainville said that she did not want to discuss the personal details of Lambert's life. Rainville said that she has never wavered in her belief that Lambert is innocent. Not one bit, she said. But a life has forever been lost. For Hazel and Whitehead and John Show, the life that has been lost is that of their only child. And for John, he's an only child. So after Laurie's death, his parents died, and now he's left alone. He does not have any children, and he does not have any grandchildren. But he does have godchildren, which he cares for. There's been no graduation from high school or college for Laurie to celebrate. No one to walk down the aisle for John's show. No grandchildren to hold. Though 30 years have passed for them, the loss of their daughter seems like it happened just yesterday. Whitehead, her mother, says she has worked hard not to become angry. She gets up and faces every day and tries it to make the best she can. Quote, I just look back on the life that I had with Laurie and the good times and try to stay focused on that, unquote, she said. She keeps things to herself. She added, other people's lives have moved on and she does not want to bother them or bore them with her talk of her 16-year-old daughter, who is never far from her thoughts. Her daughter's photos remain in her house. Her memories remain vivid. Quote, I do not see me in my lifetime at a point where she's not in my present thoughts, unquote, she said. Sho said he is glad he is still working, which I think he's probably retired by now. This was 10 years ago. It keeps him occupied and busy. He's grateful for his godchildren and tries to treat them like his own grandchildren. An only child, he is the last of his immediate family. Both of his parents have died since Laurie's death. Today he'll carry a single rose to the cemetery where his daughter is buried. Quote, it hurts, unquote, he said. Quote, I see people who have children, family. Hazel and I don't have any grandchildren. It's tough and it hurts, unquote. Neither he or Whitehead have run into Yunkin since he was released from prison in 2003. So since his release back 10 years ago, he was a regular bowler at the Garden Spot bowling alley in Strasbourg, the same bowling alley where he bowled with Lambert and Buck before the killing, and where he was arrested afterward. Like I said, just kind of like it never happened. Until a fire destroyed the alley 10 years ago. He has tattoos, purple ribbon with words live strong and just do it. And he could not be reached for comment. So he's living his own life, vacant of all memory or remorse or thought about Laurie Sho, the life he ruined, and all the other lives he's ruined or helped ruin. He wasn't the only one involved. So he was ordered to pay $12,000 and still owes more than $7,000. So I apologize. He's only paid $5,000 of it, not $7,000, like I said before. But Laurie Sho's mother says that that's okay. I think even though he hasn't paid back all of the money, she thinks it's a good reminder that he's out there and he has to pay her that money because from time to time he has to think about her daughter. Quote, the money doesn't matter, but he should be made accountable for what he helped to do, unquote, she said. Whitehead and Sho also have not heard much about Buck in recent years. Her family left the area after the arrest and are believed to live in Oregon, thousands of miles away from where she is imprisoned. In the past 2 decades, Whitehead said she has had time to come to a certain sort of peace about what happened. Quote, life goes on, unquote, she said. Quote, you have to do your best to continue to do what you can do to make your life better and to help others. Quote, I truly believe God has a plan for me. I do not know if I've totally figured out what it is, but I will keep working at it, unquote. Now, I know her family loves her very much. Matter of fact, a gal who contacted me is part of her family and wanted me to do this case because she wants to keep the message out there about Laurie, because Michelle seems to have sensationalized her life and made this huge audience for herself. And Laurie, she doesn't want Laurie to fade into the background, and I do not blame her. Laurie was innocent, naive, and beautiful, and you could just tell in her eyes she is a kind-hearted human being. And I give her mother lots of credit. She is a better person than I, because waking up every day not angry, knowing that your daughter's, killer's helper is out on the street having a great life, living it up, and Lambert is, making quite a name for herself in prison, gets her degree, has a child, all those things, gets to see her parents, I'm sure sees her child, maybe not, I don't know. But these are all things that she would have liked to have seen her daughter do. But instead of feeling like that, she gets up every day and she changes the laws on stalking. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I am proud to do this case. So thank you very much for the recommendation. And this is part one. I have a lot more notes on this, so this isn't the end of it. I do want to go over the rest of the story. This is full interview on the people and what's happened to them after, years, 30 years of this case, just kind of taking a toll on them, and how their lives have changed or stayed the same. So have a great evening, morning, or afternoon. And this is Jody with All True Crime. Spoken, not whispered. And have a good one. Thank you. Good night.